So if you have a competent civilian government which sits down with military leadership and sincerely tries to look at how you can move the country forward on multiple dimensions, how you can move it forward, for instance, in the education sector and health, by allocating resources that are currently used for defense away from that sector into other important sectors without compromising defensive capability. So that can be looked at, and it must be looked at, and there are ways to do it.
It must be looked at, but do you really think that it will be looked at? Because in the last 63 odd years of Pakistan's sort of existence, we have had almost 45 years of dictatorship or military rule.
Yes.
And each time you have military rule, when you notice how the military lives and how the army, with the facilities and resources given to them, you realize that the rest of the country, that is the maybe 85 or 90% of the country is being deprived of that budget.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So how do you think that, in the next couple of years or maybe one term in government is going to change something that has been practiced for almost half a century?
Well, it's not. Let's put it this way: it's not going to be easy, but unfortunately, it has to be done because whatever. Let me put it to you this way: the military does get a much larger share of resources than it should be getting. And some of those resources are in areas which, as you refer to, are luxuries and are to ensure a lifestyle that is perhaps beyond what tough military people should be living. Now, that of course has to be looked at, and it can't be ignored. Your question was that it's been happening for so long, and do you think that you can just change it quickly or in one term? I think it won't change very quickly, but it will change, and it has to change, because what you have to appreciate, and I think what the army appreciates also. Actually, you had several questions in there. You also had this issue of, they're ruling for 45 years and...
basically my point was that we have had military dictators or military rulers for about 45 years out of the 63 years, on an average. I'm not no exact figures here, but we've had sort of military leadership for that period of time, and a lot of our budget, our annual budget, is allocated to defense. Even whether we have a reason to defend ourselves or not, that budget still goes to defense, and it goes to support the lifestyle of the military and the army and the institution, the forces that are a very, very small percentage of the population. So you're depriving probably 85 or 90% or more percentage of your population for these 8 to 10% of people who are in the armed forces. Is that fair?
Well, I think we need to look carefully at the numbers, and I think certainly if someone is living a luxurious lifestyle, certainly any servant of the government of Pakistan, whether he's a military officer or a civilian officer, it's okay. If anyone who draws a salary from the government of Pakistan is living a luxurious lifestyle, that has to be condemned, no matter which agency they're with, and it has to be checked, because it's unconscionable that it should happen in a poor country. Okay, so let's be clear on that. Now, in terms of what you said, that 60% or a very large amount of our budget is going to the military and is being used to support such lifestyles. I think if you were to look carefully at the numbers, the amount of money being spent on supporting the lifestyle is relatively trivial compared to the money going in to the big ticket items that are used in defense, to the tanks and aircraft and guns. True, it's, you know, we don't see those things. We see the luxury that a lot of these senior army people enjoy, and so that stands out. But I think in terms, and really it shouldn't happen. Like I said, anyone who works for the government, whether they're army or civil, cannot and should not, just as a matter of conscience, should not live a luxurious lifestyle in a poor country. So that has to be addressed. But in terms of, you know, where your question really is on the mark, is that does it make sense to have such a big military establishment? Because most of the money is actually going to support the establishment, the equipment and the recurring costs, the maintenance, the spare parts, the fuel. That's where the bulk of the cost is going. And there you have a good point. That issue must be addressed. And I think the way to address it is to sit down and do a kind of, you know, what business people call zero-based budgeting. You say, okay, let's assume that we have no army. And you say, okay, now what do we need? What elements do we need of all this army that we have now to guarantee and secure an unbreakable defense, or a defense that is you know, almost impenetrable, because there's no such thing as an absolute defense. So you have to assume a certain level of reliability on it. And then you bring those elements back in. And once you've achieved that basic level of defense, you then basically slowly phase out those elements that are not contributing to that defense. And that takes out all kinds of offensive capability which you don't need. Because we don't have any offensive designs, or we should not. It's significant, for instance, that we have nuclear weapons, and I think that's wonderful that we have them. They're horrible, horrible weapons. But if you look at the history of the world, if you look at the Cold War, if you look at since the Second World War when the weapons appeared, they've succeeded in keeping peace. And if they can succeed in keeping peace, they're a good thing to have. We have them. Our main military rival, as we view it, has them. So they are ensuring a kind of balance in power. And simply this kind of balance should allow both sides to drastically cut down on conventional forces, which means drastically cut down on expenses. Now, the same logic applies to India, for instance, where you know, they're a much more developed country than we are, and they're very industrially powerful and so on. But that being said, you know, they have a larger, there are more people who live in almost abject poverty in India than the whole population of Pakistan. So everyone benefits here. If we cut down our military forces and channel money into other services in other areas, everyone will benefit. And we in Pakistan have to do it. We have to do it. There's no way out.
Okay. Do you really think that only by giving tickets to good people, it's going to be enough to convince the people to vote for you, and you could win the political scenario in the next electoral system in 2013?
I think no, I don't think that by itself will be enough. And that's, you know, our strategy is a very detailed strategy, and it calls, certainly that's an element, that we will give tickets only to people who are literate and competent and decent. But that's not all. I mean, that's just one element of a multi-pronged strategy that will support these people and enable them to get the votes that we need to come to power. But the short answer is that no, that's not enough. It's not enough. But the question is, there has to be a lot more, and we're going to do it.